Yo, brother,
Hear me?
I can hear. I can hear now.
Am I frozen?
You're frozen, yeah,
Are
the
you
video.
frozen?
The video's frozen, yeah.
Can you hear me? Maybe I need a fuck these things. These things are gnarly.
Yeah,
Ready to
headphones
eat.
helps. Yeah, you might get brain cancer though. Fuck.
How's that? Can you hear me okay?
That's better, man. Yeah, that's sick.
Killer. How's everything, bro?
Good, man. Fucking real good, yeah. Cruising, eh? Just yeah, what are we doing down here? It's the end of summer, so we're moving into like the surf season, and there's a lot of shark activity. That's been pretty rattling.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
not surfing a heap. I'm just trying to pick my windows, make sure it's worth dying for.
Dude, that's heavy.
It's heavy. It's fucking like it's ridiculous. Yeah, how you been?
Good, yeah. I mean, waves are good today. Just trying to find the odd peak here and there, but yeah, waves have been. It's been a kind of average winter, I would say, at best. But
Mm.
it opens up a lot more like corners. Like if you go around the corner, you'll find a little bit more opportunity, but you just don't get the main power source.
Yeah, it did seem like that. There wasn't a heap of good days at Pipe. I mean, that's kind of in Australia our only metric for really gauging whether it's been a good
Yeah.
season or not. But yeah, it did seem like not one of the better ones.
How's this? How is it sound okay, or is it I can change my computer if this thing is you think it can be better?
It sounds pretty good to me, man. Yeah.
It's okay. Okay,
Yeah.
killer. Just want to make sure that it doesn't have like weird back noise or whatever.
No, it sounds pretty good. But we can just roll straight into it if you like, man.
Yeah, 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 totally.
Because you are the inaugural, yeah, inaugural. That means first guest on our new show, which is basically celebrating and discussing Asia Pacific culture, culture from our region, Australia, Polynesia, Melanesia, Indonesia. Because I think like really our culture, it's important to be discussed and understood. There are issues within the culture, but then there's also incredible potential for this culture to be exported around the world and make a really positive impact on the world. And I think it's pretty crazy right now that there's actually a Hawaiian who's like one step away from being the president of the United States of America. So now seems like a good time to really like extrapolate and understand what our culture actually is and what direction it is moving in. And I don't think there is a better representative of Asia Pacific, Asia Pacifica culture than yourself, man. You combine Hawaiian and working class American values into one person through your mother and your father being native Hawaiian, your mother being a blue collar chick from California or the United States
Yeah,
mainland,
San Diego.
San Diego. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Yeah.
And then in your own personal life, man, or professional life, I should say, like combining science with native Hawaiian concepts around the ocean, surfing, reefs. Yeah, it's amazing. And all of it was celebrated in a recent Vice documentary, man, which was an incredible thing to watch, actually. So congrats on that and welcome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a bit embellished, I think, the some of the description of who I am or what I do, but I appreciate the kind words and yeah, I'm just trying to be a part of a sort of thriving culture that is contributing to the world. And yeah, I think everyone's trying their best. I have a lot of shortcomings, and I still am doing a lot of work to get past some of the cultural, I guess, obstacles I maybe place in front of myself and maybe has been placed in front of me growing up. But that being said, yeah, I feel like I'm really honored to do some of the work that I get to do, honored to be able to talk to open-minded people like yourselves. And yeah, I'm excited to explore kind of what are some of the uh, thoughts and questions maybe that people might have for people who grow up in a sort of nation within a nation.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's a really good point that you make, man. Like, you have had to overcome some of the traditional ailments that beset a lot of Indigenous people in this area, namely the trauma of colonization, which is, been acutely felt through your father's side and passed on to you. And, you have to deal with that and you have to process that and contain that pain and stop the spread of it onto the people around you, onto the next generation, your children. So it's no small feat, man, and that's something that you fully comprehend now at this age, and you work at, and full credit to you for doing that. And it is something that is explored a little bit in this Vice documentary. It was something that we talked about a lot, and we explored in that Surfing World article. But yeah, like maybe you can talk to us a little bit about um, yeah, that history. I guess like explain to people. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to know exactly what I'm talking about there, but yeah, you'd be better placed to explain what I mean.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's always like an interesting approach to take when talking about the history of colonization of where I come from. Um, I've realized, and I actually wasn't too aware of it until kind of after the Vice documentary, of how sensitive certain groups of people are when talking about someone's lived experience. And even if it's an anecdotal experience, it's not like there's not a lot of data around what I went through or how I see colonization. It's just one person's kind of worldview on it. But that worldview is prevalent within my community of Hawaiian people, where it's not necessarily seen as a very great thing to be an American. At least when I was growing up, a lot of my group of friends and my family, no one really was Fourth of July waving like United States of America flags, and people weren't really like it's just weird to even do like the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that. It just that's how I grew up, and this is the '90s and early 2000s. So um, this is all coming from, for those who may be listening and are hypersensitive to uh, maybe people from a marginalized communities calling out some of their lived experiences. This is just mine, and I could be wrong, and no one really has to agree with it. And I'm not trying to speak for any other Hawaiians besides what I kind of grew up in. And the way I grew up, um, we weren't growing up speaking our language. It wasn't something that was seen as a way to success. The language seemed like an old person thing. It doesn't seem like innovative. It didn't seem like going into formal education around cultural ideas or cultural practice. Even surfing seemed as like a successful life path growing up. Even surfing, it's like that's a Hawaiian thing where I grew up, and it just wasn't necessarily seen as like a way to find a way to survive. Because growing up in Hawaii, um, I'm lucky to grow up in sort of a more detached community from a lot of the tourism, but everywhere else in Hawaii, when I would visit, you could see the pressure of communities, and even the children feeling like the squeeze of the dollar on their families, where now the money became such a central focus a lot of times, at least for certain some families, and some of maybe the class or whatever, the social space that I was growing up in and that I grew up in. Uh, we didn't have a lot of financial stability. So money became this sort of golden goose to find stability. So a lot of my friends, including myself, had this perception put on us that money is going to equal stability. You won't have to have stress if you have money. But it wasn't clear how to make money, and it wasn't clear sort of how to be a steward of dollars. And on top of that, we were also paralleled with saying money is important, but also the environment is important. The ocean is important. The wind is important. Being a Hawaiian is important. So you had sort of these like conflicting ideas where culturally we didn't have a sense of ownership in that same way as other parts of the world. So it really growing up in Hawaii for me was very confusing a lot of the time. I knew I looked different and I talked different than a United States citizen for a majority of them who lived on the continent, but I was told that I was an American. So like I grew up personally with this sort of like identity crisis from a young age. And this all kind of stems from uh, the late 1700s when James Cook arrived to our islands via the trading uh, era. And when he arrived to the islands, the Hawaiian's world, I was taught, expanded well beyond the borders of Polynesia. And that began the onset of the European culture beginning to permeate into the Hawaiian culture, first through trade, then through sort of like royal interactions through the monarch. And after about 100 years of this awkward uh, introduction, uh, the United States eventually overthrew the Hawaiian kingdom in 1893. So it went from a Hawaiian chiefdom to a Hawaiian kingdom to an American territory into a state of United States of America. So we've had this sort of really drastic social and societal flip over about 100 years. So it's like 100 years when you think about it seems like a lot, maybe, but I mean, 100 years ago, we're talking about when people still talk about the world wars. Imagine it doesn't seem like that long ago. So a Hawaiian, when they were now told they're an American, just their grandparents or their parents were like, "We're Hawaiian nationals." What? And there became sort of this separation between the grandchildren and the grandparents. So it was sort of was like a breaking of the identity because the genealogical ties to identity is so strong across Polynesia that a lot of the strategy to assimilate the new generation of the Hawaiian, it was to separate that identity from who they are genealogically. So without sort of an identity of where you come from, you're just looking for any sort of identity, and America was right there, or North America was there to like, you're an American. So that's sort of, I guess, I don't know if that was a great explanation or
Oh, it's
not, but that's
incredible.
sort of the flow of what kind of happened from 1776 to 1893. Then you move up to 1987 when I was born. It's like another 100 years of now me hearing the old language at like my auntie them's house, but like my parents weren't speaking it. My mom was from California. My dad is like Hawaiian. He was literally like beat for speaking Hawaiian. So it's like it was like just really confusing to figure out who we were as a family, who I was as a child, and how do I find a community?
Mm, mm. Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot of similarities between the Hawaiian situation and the Indigenous Australian situation. In fact, Captain Cook arrived here only 2 years after. 1778, I think, was first contact between Cook and Indigenous people at yeah, Botany Bay or La Perouse there, right where Cape Solander and ours is. Like he literally sailed
Oh wow.
past ours on the way into Australia for first
Wow.
contact. Yeah. Um, and that same or a similar process evolved in which there was the attempt to separate Aboriginal people from their culture via the forced removal of children and the placing of
Mm,
them in these kind of white Christian
mm,
boarding houses and boarding schools. I mean, prior to that, there was at least 100 years of warfare between Indigenous
mm,
people and settlers. But the what is considered to be a really obvious genocide is that boarding school program, and people often think of
mm,
genocide as the attempt to like slaughter and kill people, and that is true, and that happened in Australia, but it's more clearly defined by the UN as any attempt to eradicate a culture, and that's what that schooling system was designed to do, banning native tongue and basically anglicizing Indigenous people. They did it in Canada. I'm pretty certain they did it in Hawaii, and they've done it in Australia. The irony is, I don't know if it's a irony is exactly the right word, but the reality is, in a country like Australia, in a nation like Hawaii, if this capitalist colonialist system is going to operate there, the only way to function in that system is to be schooled in that system and how it works. And the sad irony is that a lot of the people, or some of the people who went through that schooling system, that who were part of the stolen generation, were able to function within the capitalist colonialist system, although they carried tremendous pain and suffering.
mm,
And I'm not in any way justifying either colonization or that schooling system, but uh, like how else do you operate within a colonial capitalist
mm,
matrix without having the skills, like you said, to speak the language, to understand how to make money and steward money, and have all of these skills that are essential to survive in the capitalist colonialist matrix without being schooled in those skills from a young age. And like that is it's a hard thing for me to say out loud because it sounds like
mhm.
I'm justifying that system, but what I'm looking at it just from a fuck, I don't know. It's such an awkward one, man. It once colonization sets in and uh, they're not leaving. What do you
Yeah.
do as an Indigenous person? Um, uh, what we've seen in Australia is that if you try and fight the system, if you hate the system, as a lot of Indigenous people do, this is a system that you cannot fight. If you don't want to participate in the system, it criminalizes you, it
Mm,
incarcerates you, and the cycle of trauma only deepens and prolongs. And that is the situation of Indigenous people in this country, many of whom hold a lot of resentment and hatred towards white people, which is also misdirected. Like you cannot, and you feel this in Hawaii too. There is a lot of resentment towards white people, Haoles. But the reality is, in our situation in Australia, that even the history, like it started as a penal colony. So people were sent here in chains. They were poor Irish people. Indigenous people from islands who were being colonized themselves. They were sent here. And then it was just a classical situation where the poor whites and the poor blacks were set against each other by the aristocratic colonial force, which was the English. And that's basically been the situation ever since. Those two groups, poor whites and poor blacks, generally, or like working class whites and um, working or welfare class Indigenous uh, blacks, don't generally get along, or like there's a lot of resentment between those
mm,
groups.
mm,
Uh, you hear Malcolm X talk about this, like within the context of America, like the whole goal was to turn poor blacks and poor whites against each other, and that we can't
mm,
really take the bait on that one because that is just doing the bidding of the aristocratic colonial class. Yeah, what is your take on that? White black relations, Indigenous versus non Indigenous relations in Hawaii. I know it's a really awkward one there, as it is here, and there is quite a bit of resentment between those groups. I mean, but then again, there's so many people in the islands as there is here who combine those two groups into one person.
mm,
You're one of them.
mm, mm. Yeah. Well, like kind of moving back quickly just to when you talked about how to exist in a capitalistic society as sort of an indigenous community. The unique thing about Hawaii is capital came first before any sort of colonial uh, objective. The trade was the first. So the merchant introduced the capital, and the chiefs became pretty good at it. There's some pretty famous chiefs that began doing international trade with China. They've been doing international trade with the state or with the Americas, and there was this sort of understanding of, okay, there's a value ship placed on coin, and there's a value ship placed on resources. So how do we trade those things? One of the big things that broke some of the initial trades was the opioid, um, or the opium trade out of China. So the opium trade in those like late 1700s, early 1800s is a big trade across the world. So there was just a lot of political, um, the same issues that I think is going on with the trades now through the tariffs and through oil is happening, 200 years ago, but for different resources. Whale oil, it was, for opium, it was fertilizer. These are all things that people were, countries were made, wars were created because of these resources. So I think, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. You're back.
Yeah, the Hawaiian kingdom and the Hawaiian chiefdom, when it was still even a chiefdom in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they understood capital. Um, it was just difficult because the infrastructure wasn't quite developed, and it was, I think, personally for me, I don't know if it was as sophisticated as some of the other institutions around trade around the world at that time, which put them at a disadvantage. But I think it's important to recognize that Hawaiian people and the Hawaiian, at least leadership, governance, were good traders. They understood. One of the biggest lack within the infrastructure became the population of workers because of disease. 80%, to some say even 90% of the population was fell victim to diseases, which is a massive hit to your working class. If you have no workers because they're not alive, it's difficult to keep up with some of the demands. So it was just kind of like I feel a sequence and a series of unfortunate events around the capital in that sense. But I do believe that hopefully it doesn't get lost that the idea that some people value land by dollars was not a thing that we could understand. I think we understood it. It was difficult for us I believe, difficult to uh, get entry into the game. if that makes sense. And even if there was entry, how do you sustain if you haven't been, I guess that part, haven't been playing it for a while? There's new rules that keep popping up that if you don't have a solid infrastructure or experience in that, it can become very difficult. And I think that's probably what happened. And in regards to these boarding schools, I went to one. I actually went to, and it's for Hawaiians, and it does a lot of good stuff in the community, but it is recognized under the federal register as a boarding school, similar to a lot of those schools that were trying to assimilate the Native Americans into the Western, quote unquote, Western sort of culture, the stolen children, things like that. So I understand those that that world as well, maybe not to the same extent as some of the horrible things that happened to a lot of the Native Americans, to a lot of the indigenous peoples of Australia and a lot of the other communities. I think for the most part within Hawaii, I think it wasn't as brutal as some of the other parts of the world. But there definitely was um, a redefining of what it meant to be a good and industrious person. One being we had to cut our hair. And I remember that was one of the biggest sort of trips I had when I went to the boarding school is they made me cut my hair. I couldn't have my hair touch the top of my ears or touch my collar. And it was just kind of strange to kind of be sat down and, you have to like buzz your hair or you get mandatory detention or you could get kicked out of the school, which brought a lot of shame to your family. So it was like yeah, it was a now they don't have that rule. This was, it was a military school too when I went there. I went there the last year. It was a military school. So we had to do like push-ups and shine buckles, and you were kind of like introduced into the military from a young age and demerits and just it was you had to like stand parade rest and do the whole marching, and it was that got dismantled too, but I kind of like got the right tail end of all that stuff. So like for me, the school was difficult for me
Mm,
um, as I was trying to find my identity. But they also provided me access to like they had a lot of money, and they were the only high school in the whole state, and I don't know, maybe in the nation that had a gene sequencer. So when I was like 15, I could sequence DNA in this room at my high school, and it was like they bought it for like $500,000 from the university or something. So like, you could go into this room, you'd be like, "Hey, I want to like see what DNA code this is. This is 2003." Like before anyone knew what a PCR test was. I was making PCR tests in school for like shrimp and snails, and like I was like doing all this stuff like 20 years before anyone even knew what that really was in my community. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's a
mm,
hard one for me even because I've benefited from this strange boarding school at the time, but it also was only for Hawaiians. Like you had to have Hawaiian blood to even get into the school, and you had to test into it. So it was like you were deemed as like the brightest future hope for the community, but you're learning about DNA versus your language. So it's like this really weird thing to wrestle with growing up, and I got into science. Like I was into it because it was like I would try to express my culture and my values and these, it wasn't like we didn't speak Hawaiian at all. It just was more like Hawaiian language just seemed like an old thing. But I was interested in that too. So I'm like super interested in my cultural heritage, and science was like this way to talk about the same thing in a way that non-Hawaiian people understood. Like instead of talking about how um like we have a saying that the trees bring the rain. But if you talk about in science, you can talk about you know, how like there's evaporation and respiration across these like, stoma and these different cellular like relationships that are happening on the plant, where it's actually pulling moisture in from the surrounding environment and condensing it down and creating like mist and clouds. And this is how the hydrology and the rain cycle happens. So people are like, oh, that makes sense. The tree is needed for precipitation to happen. Where we just say the trees bring the rain. Now you have two ways of saying the same thing. And I could not feel like I was crazy uh, by expressing something. And I'm saying that as I'm like looking at the rainfall. That's just like the only reason why I brought up that example. But uh, yeah, I mean, and it's not like there's people in other parts of the world that have gone through, I think, a lot worse. And I'm sure there's people who felt wronged by coming to Hawaii and feeling like, well, I'm a poor white person and I come here and you people call me Haole, and you're prejudiced against me, so you know what, like don't complain if people are prejudiced to you. That's kind of a new thing that I've kind of recently been realizing, is that sometimes when I speak about a lived experience, there are people who will find, well, you did it to us, so don't complain about it, or don't talk about it, or that didn't happen. That was another thing that I couldn't believe, people saying like, you're lying, that never happened to you. If you live some prejudice or racism, you're lying. And I'm like, what? Why would I lie? Like I I I feel now, it doesn't bother me as much now, all of that. Fast forward to now, 38 years old. I've lived through a lot of that trauma. So I've come to um, understand where it comes from and how I can implement tools that I've learned along the way to manage that trauma and mitigate negative outcomes from that trauma. So it doesn't bother me too much now, though it still exists inside of me. Um, it does suck. It sucks when people come here and they're called a haole, like that, and they take it as a derogatory statement, because haole is a Hawaiian word that just means from somewhere else. And there are stories within the chants and the songs of Hawaiians being called haole too. It's like it's not the N word. It's not like slander. It's not a derogatory statement. It's describing a difference.
Mm,
And that, I think, again, like you said, there's certain people who like to use these things within the culture and within the sort of the social archetype to pin people against each other. Oh, he called you a haole. Oh, that's like the N word. That's a bad thing. When they have never taught like, oh, actually, one of like the gnarliest pig gods is was called a haole too, in one of like the gnarliest chants ever chanted. So it's like, only conveniently only part of the story is told for the intention of dividing.
mm,
Um, and it's unfortunate, I think we exist in this really complex social dynamic that it's I understand nothing's going to go back to what it was, but as we move forward, realizing from both the Hawaiian and the non-Hawaiian part of myself, there's a lot to learn, and being reactive and assuming entitlements on both sides of the coin, it's only going to lead to more disappointment, if that makes sense.
mm, mm. Yeah, there's a real issue with othering, like placing someone in a different category to yourself, and that is something that we're trying to transcend here in our region, whether it be Australia, where we have a very large Polynesian community, many Polynesian communities in the big cities here, and Indigenous communities, and Hawaii. You have like a similar kind of population demographic really to us. I noticed when I was in Honolulu, I was like, oh wow, this place looks a lot like where I'm from. It's just like a lot of Polynesian, Filipino, Japanese, Thai,
Hmm.
white, and but it's this transcending of skin color that really needs to be undertaken. And I don't know what you think the best way to achieve this is. My opinion is that it comes through the sharing of culture and the coming together, and you know the being inclusive and bringing people in, and but essentially it's time to kind of make our own culture because the white people aren't going anywhere. They're going to be in Australia and Hawaii and New Zealand forever. And bit by bit, our skin colors are merging. And they say that, you know, in future generations, like we're just going to be completely mixed. And in fact, I think percentage wise, it's already tipped in Australia to that point where there's more mixed people, mixed Asia Pacific people than white people. And some people fear that, which is fucking ridiculous. Those people are idiots. Just like I also find, you know, people who have all this resentment towards white people as also kind of idiots. Like it's a redundant way of looking at the world. You're just causing your own self pain and suffering. Anger is the seed of all sickness. If you're just angry at people for existing in a place that they had no choice, they were born into it. And were themselves in this situation in Australia likely to have been prisoners deported from their homeland anyway. Um, so all the resentment and the division and the racial nature of our communities is is completely unhelpful. And white and black are just as guilty, man. Like in this country, like yeah, they're just as guilty. And I grew up with many Indigenous people. You know, my mum's partner was Indigenous. You know, I went would. You mentioned your 4th of July celebrations. We have Australia Day here, but then the Indigenous have their own celebration called Yabin or Survival Day on that same day. I've been to both celebrations. So have definitely had a foot in both camps, but can see that, yeah, there is like still a lot of resentment. What do you think is the way to break down those racial divides?
I mean, shucks, like I don't have an answer that I think is going to work. I'm just as lost, I think, on how to fix it. But moving forward, I I try to just show a bit of compassion, maybe, and I'm kind of been thinking about this idea of asking for understanding versus people to understand me. You know, having more of an understanding that there is a difference and we are living like a different sort of life. And I mean, there's division within the Hawaiian community. It's like we're not all united. You know, there's bad actors within our community as Hawaiian people, and I know there's bad actors in other, and then there's good actors in those communities as well. And I like to see them as like allies. And now some of my best friends and closest people in my life, they don't have Polynesian blood. They don't have ancestry to any of the Moana Nui Akea Oceania, Polynesia. They're coming from Ireland or something like that, you know. And I'd never thought as a youth that I would say that some of my closest friends, people that I now consider family, are don't have um, lineal ties to this ocean that our people have existed for thousands of years. And that's helped me to sort of like tone it back a bit. You know, I wasn't always as maybe welcoming. And that's what's something that sometimes is hard for me. Like I try to exist today as someone who is thoughtful and give people benefit of the doubt, but I didn't grow up that way. And it's hard, you know, being put in situations sometimes where people challenge me and they assume because I went to a private school and because I got a degree that I I didn't grow up in certain situations that I grew up in, and you know, it's just a personal. journey even for me. Like again, I can't tell other people what to do. I just know that for me, I've found that I just have to humble my ego a bit when people say things. There's certain things that people will say that I'm just like, we're really talking like we're back in the 1700s, 1800s with what, you know, the people's views about being afraid of losing the skin color. Uh, a- and I'm just like for me, it's funny too when people ask like, how much Hawaiian are you? You know, that's a big, and to me, that's such a silly question. Like, I'm 100% Hawaiian, and I'm 100% something else too. Like, I am who I am, 100% of who I am, and it's not like any less because my mom is from San Diego or my dad is, you know, from Hawaii. Like, I'm a Hawaiian. Uh, I have lineal ties to different places on this planet, which connects me to those communities and to that land and to that ocean, which I try to honor. But it doesn't, to me, it doesn't like, there's no separation in that sense. And, you know, some people don't have that, you know, I guess, lineal descent to this land prior to the, you know, James Cook, but it existed as a nation before the overthrow. So essentially, if you have any sort of lineal descent from 1776 or even before 1893, you would have been a Hawaiian national. There was like white people that spoke native Hawaiian all the time, wrote it, learned it. You were still a Hawaiian national, like you were a Hawaiian, whether you were brown or white or black or whatever. Like if you had if you had a citizenship, you were a Hawaiian. If you were a lineal descendant, you were called Kanaka Maoli, Kanaka Oiwi. You're called you had a different distinction in addition to your Hawaiianness. Um, but yeah, I think sometimes, and I was there for a lot of time, and I still wrestle with it too, is when you feel sometimes like you don't have what you want, you start to point your finger at someone else and say, I want that. Or you say it's your fault and you start pointing the blame. And it's just that's the easier way to do it. You know, it's just easier to point the finger. It's harder to self-reflect and say, okay, how can I start to be a part of that change to honor that identity of what you want to be? Uh, it's just hard. It's hard for me too. Like even today for me, it's easier to, oh, look at them, they have more. Oh, because we got overthrown. Oh, because of the missionary. Oh, because of this. And they were a part of the story, but what do I have to do now um, to change that narrative? What is the work that I got to do to show that as a Hawaiian man, I am just as much the warrior as I am the caregiver? You know, how do I rewrite some of those stereotypes and those false narratives that have been perpetuated by people who didn't truly know the culture? You know, I think it's just ill-informed people sharing information with ill-informed people. So I would like to be someone, at least in my work, to help to inform people in what I believe it means to be an Indigenous person today, through being a global contributor, and also honest about how difficult sometimes life is.
Mm. And in order to understand who is your ally and who is your enemy within the capitalist colonialist system, it is essential to have a really strong understanding of the class system. Because, working class people are not generally the architects or the beneficiaries of a colonial capitalist system. And I think a lot of the resentment amongst poor whites and working class whites towards Indigenous people, at least in this country, is on the basis of being blamed for being the architects of the system. Whereas the reality is, for these people, it's like, no, no, the system is entrenched. If you cannot beat the system, you join the system or you end up incarcerated. A lot of Indigenous people completely understand why they don't want to join the system. They hate the system. It's been rammed down their throat, and they blame all white people for being the architects of that system, but not understanding that people in the working class and the lower classes have very little agency and autonomy within that system. They are just completely locked into the system. And if you can't beat it, you have to join it. That is the reality that has been cast over us for centuries in Australia, in Hawaii,
Mm.
in New Zealand. And if you don't understand that how the class system works, then yeah, you're going to be incapable of finding allies who are not your own skin color. Um, so yeah, what do you make of that? The class system's an interesting one because it's definitely a thing in Hawaii. Like yeah, there's a few different kinds of white person, isn't there? There are those who have
Yeah.
escaped the mainland, who basically are trying to get away from capitalism and the class system, and
Hmm.
they've come to Hawaii to essentially live a very humble, wholesome life and surf and grow their own food and try to connect with a traditional. Kind of more local way of life, which is kind of the bracket I see myself in as being a man of the Asia Pacific region. Really, all I want to do is surf, fish, grow my own
Mm.
food, and try to um, extricate myself from capitalism, which has punished my family for generations for being poor.
Mm. Mm.
And that is the goal. And to be told that I am
Mm.
a product of white privilege
You're the devil. Yeah, yeah.
and the devil and all these things. I'm like, man, like we grew up on welfare, a single parent household. Like that's why we have so many Indigenous friends and Polynesian friends because poverty makes
Mm.
strange bedfellows. Like we were living in the same areas, and to this day I live around the corner from an Indigenous mission. So the an understanding of the class system seems essential to making sense of our current situation and finding people who we can come together with to begin to unpack and pick apart this class system. I don't think British and American colonialism has any part to play in the future of these Asia Pacific nations that we live in. Like, I think it's now just a process of gradually degrading, disrupting, and dismantling these colonial systems that exist in these fucking outposts in the far, far east of the world. We couldn't be further away from the West. We are in the far east. And the beauty of where we live is we have access to all of the science and technology that is a part of the Western canon, mixed with indigenous knowledge systems, connection to country, to land, to the stars. We're able to combine these two knowledge forms into something that I think really is at the foundation of the Asia Pacific identity moving forward. And you are like the epitome of this.
Well, I don't know about with me, uh, and for me, I don't, for me, like when I look at how that dichotomy exists and the discourse between the blame, uh, I can't speak to what people should do, but what I can speak to is my own lived experience. And what I found is when I was in a place in my life where I blamed white people, for my issues. And not because I realized this, like I just one day I was like, oh, the whole reason that I have nothing is because of the white man. It was indoctrinated on, the people who raised me told me that. So and these are people who like fed me and they took care of me and they're my aunties and stuff. Like they were really nice people, but they're like, yeah, don't trust the Howleys. So I was like, okay, like what? I mean, they never showed me any harm, any reason why I shouldn't believe them. So yeah, there's a long part of my life where I just thought that was the reason why I was in a marginalized situation. And what helped me to find allies uh, is the people when I blamed them, they just told me that I was right. They're like, yeah, you're right. Even if they didn't believe it, even if they knew that they weren't the reason, the allies in my life just listened to me and just agreed with me. And they said, I'm on your team. If you don't trust me, that's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to try to justify what you believe in. You're entitled to that. There was no longer uh, any sort of like abrasiveness in that. And I kind of started to think in my mind, whoa, like now I have a white person telling me what my brown aunties were telling me. This is now like and it helped me to work through that. And I started asking myself, is this, it, I just seen, oh, don't trust a white person. I told them that they're the problem, and they told me, it's okay to feel that way. It's
Mm,
okay. And that kind of rewired a lot of sort of the noise in my mind. Um, and then I grew into a place where I realized that there's a spectrum of others, and someone once told me, an uncle told me, he's like, these are the spiritual refugees. They they're finding a home because where their home is, they've been abused. Their spirit has been really hurt. And that blew my mind. And really, there's a place in my town, kind of towards the south, where it started making. I was like, oh, these hippies, oh, like I can't. They just come over here, Trustafarians and stuff like that. Then I started to realize, like, whoa, like spiritual refugees. That hurt me. Like they don't. With all the trauma we exist in, I can still, even at a young age, I never thought that there's a disconnect from the wind and the clouds and the ocean and the trees and the rock and the mountain from me. Like at a fundamental level, I knew this is, if I can't even describe it and I'm trouble articulating who I know what I am. And when I'm here in this place, I can exist in peace. There are people out there without that. And that made me feel sad, that was like, oh, that's not a good thing. And that's what I try to share now with some of my community, because this isn't gone, it still exists, and there's the division, and people are looking for an answer. We're just trying to make reason of why we're unhappy. And it's just like, to me, I try to look at it where the allies allowed me to sort of grieve in that trauma, and that sort of understanding that they gave to me without really knowing. I don't understand it, but I'm going to give you some understanding and some patience that helped me to find some really close friends. And I
mm,
guess that's my own lived experience of that.
mm. Yeah, empathy, it has to be a two-way street because, you know, I know a lot of poor white people who, as you said, have been abused by this system. And it's funny when you grow up poor and white too, like you are taught to also hate and other rich white people. Then, we call them blue bloods. Like we know that they're not our friends. And you literally raised to hate them with pretty much the same level of resentment as Indigenous people have for all white people. But we're like the kind of point that I'm trying to get across is like, no, no, no. We also hate those same people. We actually have a common enemy. And this is what Malcolm X's
Yeah.
point was too. Um, and uh, I guess like the thing with like a lot of poor white people, because they've been abused, they don't have necessarily so much space to listen and hear someone else's tale of victimhood.
Mm,
And this is, I think, explored in that book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, where he talks about pain bodies. People who have been abused have pain bodies in them. And those pain bodies, like, they take a lot of work to process and they can kind of rub on each other too. And that's what I kind of see is like, you got like poor white people who, they're from these fractured families where alcohol and drugs and domestic violence and
mm,
child abuse are rampant, unemployment, meth. These things are super ubiquitous in deprived white communities here. and then you have Indigenous people who are suffering a lot of the same issues and wanting these white people to care about the Indigenous people's issues, but they kind of they're both so wrapped up in their own victimhood that they just don't have
Totally.
space. And they're just like, fuck, I don't want to hear your sob story, bro. I got my own shit going on. Even though they don't articulate it
Hmm.
like that, that is what is going on. And then to unpack why Western people are often so sick, even when they have all the money in the world, is really due to the fact that we've, for centuries, been basing our happiness on the accruing of material wealth, which by definition will never deliver you happiness. And it's been an absolute fucking cancer on the face of the planet and continues to be more and more so by the day. We see American imperialism, European colonialism. It is just all about seizing land, abusing the people who occupy that land, taking what is theirs, and just kickstarting cycles of trauma all over the planet. Meanwhile, consuming resources that are unable to even bring them happiness. So, like, this is again is
Yeah.
where the kind of Asia Pacific culture and identity is so important to me because I like looking into Polynesian cultures and indigenous cultures. There's a connection with nature, the land, surfing, fishing, farming, the stars, a spiritual kind of connection to place and God that is essential for happiness and needs to be understood and valued by Western people. And by growing up in this part of the world, I think that we're more and more becoming exposed to these kind of indigenous belief systems. We're more and more becoming a bit more like that. Particularly Indonesia has a large effect on us. We all travel there a lot. We see the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians living side by side. This kind of it's all really, in my opinion, much more based in animism or Indonesian culture than any of those religions. It's connection to place and land
Mm.
and family and community. So bit by bit, we're creating, amalgamating this kind of culture out of all of our neighbors, and it's rad. We've mixed in with science, but the one last thing I would say is that as traumatizing as colonization and genocide was, uh, it also needs to be understood that white people have their own trauma historically, and that is World War One and World War Two and the Vietnam War. And these things were no picnic, and we also didn't really have a choice in whether we wanted to fight in them. And I look at many white people I know, and including my own family, and I can see the trauma from those wars rippling through the generations. My great granddad was in the First World War. My granddad was in the Second. My father grew up with a emotionally absent, injured, damaged person in his household from the Second World War. He didn't really manage, didn't have the tools to manage like that trauma. So like the thing is, I think a lot of Indigenous people fail to grasp how much trauma there is in white populations that was foisted upon us by aristocrats. Like those aristocrats don't fight in the fucking wars. They send us to do that shit. And they propagandize us and brainwash us into thinking we need to do that stuff for our honor or whatever. And sometimes we just get conscripted. So like there is a lot more shared experience in indigenous and working class whites than I think uh, either of those groups understand. And I think coming together in some kind of healing uh, format is probably the way forward. And coming together and doing like hardcore spiritual work, wellness work, connection with country, connection with breath, connection with healthy foods. This kind of, and then being able to be in a space where we can talk to each other about the things that we've experienced, the traumas that we've experienced, our histories. Um, because, yeah, we have a lot more in common than we realize. Namely, like Malcolm X said, trauma that's been foisted upon us by aristocratic governments and colonial governments.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel it's important to have those leaders in the communities that um, find unity across those spaces, because I think that's the sometimes the easiest way for those who again were like me that just listened to whoever the person in charge, whatever they said. Like that's sort of the perspective that I'm gonna adopt, because I think they're really cool people. I have a really close friend. I consider him like an older brother to me. He told me that person's cool, that person's not cool, and I just listened. Like, it didn't matter about skin color or where they're from, white, brown, black, whatever it was. They cool? He said they're cool. Ah, he's cool. Whatever. That was that. So I think there's a story that I'm sure people are familiar with, is when there was a lot of issues between the Australians and the Hawaiians on the North Shore back in the 70s. And um, yeah, it was getting pretty violent. And Eddie Aikau was one of the few people who were like, we gotta end this. Surfing is the unifier here, and we have to respect the places that we're in. If you guys can respect the communities here, we'll respect the surfing. And there's like a higher level of understanding that Eddie had, that he was able to gift, I think, the community and the time with. And that's why those people like Eddie are so important, and hopefully there's more people who are willing across those different sides to be those person, and they're the chiefs, they're the warriors, they're the ones that are going to get backlash from their communities. They're going to have to fight the opposing community, but at the end, I think they're gonna do more positive work than negative by being willing to uh, quiet the noise, I guess, if that makes sense.
That's why he's the GOAT, Eddie Aikau. And he has the purest connection to an intact Indigenous culture and was, the ultimate waterman. He was like the ultimate embodiment of, I guess, like Hawaiian culture, but then also like some Western aspects too. And yeah, it always rankles me that story. We spend a lot of time with bugs, and we've heard how that story went down. And for us, like Rabbit is pretty much he's our goat. He is like our Eddie Aikau in a lot of ways. This is a guy who's like, again, from like a poor white from I think a single parent household in Coolangatta, which was a very like working. They used to call it Penrith by the Sea. It's a very working class area, welfare class even. So this guy grew up with nothing, and when he made the comments that got him in so much trouble, he was 19 years old and probably 65 kilos wringing wet, like a skinny white kid. And he goes to Hawaii, and he gets beaten mercilessly by a gang of full grown men. A 19-year-old kid gets his teeth knocked out on the beach. And like, I don't know what could possibly justify that. Like, if you have a problem with a child or like a teenager, uh, maybe at absolute worst, sort it out like one on one. Like, maybe pick a guy who's of a similar stature and like kind of do it old school on the sand. That would be like you probably don't even have to go that far. You could literally just talk to him and go, "Hey, mate, you like what you said was super
Yeah, I,
disrespectful."
I think unfortunately I think he walked into a turbulent time. Then unfortunately he was the the straw literally that broke a lot of people's patience. And that being said, I remember being 14 at Makaha on the west side, and I just got close on my boogie board to this guy's son, and he snapped huge. He was like 300 pounds, just like snapping on me, telling me he'd pound me. Like, and I was like 14. I just was like, "Whoa, uncle, I'm sorry." And he looked at me and he grabbed me. He said, "I'm not your uncle." And I was like, "Whoa, this is a whole another situation happening." So like. I again, I can empathize with, Rabbit, uh, and also understand that when people in certain communities feel so passionately about something, a lot of times in these marginalized communities, violence is unfortunately the result of what's happening. And I've been on sides of that, and not to justify it at all, but truly, like, there's other commentary in the literature from other writers who talk about the idea of growing up being a Haole boy, kill Haole Day, so scary, everyone beats you, people don't know what it's like. I got, into fights as a Hawaiian. Like everyone is sort of like it's a part of the environment that we're in. And sometimes it's not about skin color. Sometimes it's about being in a unfortunate situation, circumstance that you maybe didn't quite think through, or maybe has put fell upon you. And yeah, it's, I think, growing up and becoming a contributor, or recognizing the community is for how you deal with it. That's sort of the life lessons that I'm still trying to figure out too. Um, but yeah, I agree. Like, that idea of people coming up to the North Shore from Australia, and like, again, if maybe some of the people on the North Shore realize that this kid, where he came from and what he had to deal with, he might have been more accepted. And maybe Eddie knew. Maybe that's why it all went down the way it went down. So again, like, I feel it's important for these community leaders to step up and kind of just tell people like me, like, hey, they're cool, they're not cool. Like, it's not worth it. Like, we're not enemies. The real enemy is out there,
Mm,
trying to take from us, both of us, and we have an opportunity to provide for ourselves. We can protect ourselves, but it's going to take a bit more unity to do so, and it's going to take a bit of work to get there, you know.
And you have these kind of two parallel streams of Hawaiian culture represented in that busting down the door saga, where you have the Aikau family, this like bastion of peaceful, traditional Hawaiian culture. It's waterman culture. It's playing the ukulele, which ironically was a Portuguese instrument. Uh,
Yeah, introduced by the Portuguese. Yeah.
yeah, but just this kind of like music, family, peace, love, like like a sense of what's the word? Just like a balanced sense of things. And then you have the Dahui, which is coming from this kind of warrior lineage. It's very much a gang that's like all about it almost kind of reminds me of a bit of the Black Power movement in America, which was kicking off around about the same time, except it's for Hawaiians. But my understanding is like who is it evolved, like it got complicated in there, man. There was drug dealing, all kinds of like violence. There was mainland American people in the mix, like manipulating uh the narrative and manipulating people, and it became a quagmire of just dis-ease and uh like trauma, and like it was like in a lot of ways yeah, it was complicated in there, and it's interesting. I love the backdoor shootout and stuff like that. But I listen to the broadcast, and I love Doctor As I Walk, and I love all the Hawaiian history you get fed. But still, to hear people laughing and kind of celebrating that moment of Rabbit getting a gnarly hiding on the beach, I think is just like actually disgusts me a little bit.
Yeah, a good book to read to kind of take through that whole era, and a more in-depth look into it, is Waves of Resistance by Dr.
Yeah,
Isaiah
you
Walker.
gave it
He
to me. I've
wrote
got it here. Yeah,
yeah, it kind of unfolds where, again, it even is like some of the pirating from what I've learned. Again, I'm not an expert on any of this, in sort of the pirating that exists on East Africa continent, but how a lot of those started as sort of protections to fisheries against some of the European cultures that were coming in and taking some of those fishery resources, and they just started wanting to protect their fish from just getting exploited and extracted from another country illegally. And then again, it evolved into piracy, at least some areas, from what I was told. So you can see how there's this always this evolution of what may start with a certain intention when money, resources, power, greed, and corruption start to get into the mix. It opens up a lot more opportunity for um, again bad actors. And yeah, we all have them in all of our communities. We know, we have family members where we love them to death, and they make life sometimes more difficult than it has to be. And I don't have the answers to all of that. It's hard. It's hard for me to see some of my friends yelling at some of my other friends. That's like a hard thing for me to understand. But again, it's mostly trying to create a sort of like a strong foundation and a strong sort of space in my life and around the people who I work with to celebrate the good in things, to not back down from challenges, but also focus on the work versus the the damage, and not to forget about it. It's just not focusing on it.
Mm.
So sometimes I think remembering the damage informs better work. But the focus for me, at least in this point in my life, I'm trying to work.
Mm. It's such an important detail, man. There was a podcast with Joe Rogan with this female journalist who wrote a book about bad therapy. And what bad therapy is this idea that's been prevalent in psych, psychological circles and psychiatry circles and trauma processing circles that like reliving your trauma over and over again in some therapeutic setting is beneficial. And the data says otherwise. It turns out that reliving trauma over and over again, talking about it and ruminating on it actually just gives it life.
Mm.
And yeah, once it's understood and you do some really direct work in understanding it and then getting the tools in how to manage it and move through it and hopefully move on from it. That's really how your time and energy should be spent, is doing the work to move on from it, and move through it as opposed to just reliving it and thinking that that's going to be helpful. If that's all you're doing is just reliving it and reinforcing it, I see a lot of people, you get the sense, and I've seen it firsthand, that in Indigenous communities here, like exactly the way you were explaining, it's common for youths and children to be raised with hate and resentment. Their parents essentially poison them and say, "Hey, like these people have fucked us over. They've stolen from us. They're to be not trusted and resented and despised. And if you get the chance, even square up with them." And so, like that is just the ultimate sin, in my opinion, to poison the innocence of a child with hate and
Yeah,
resentment and distrust. Like you couldn't do more of a disservice to your child, and that is something that I think people need to take responsibility for, or like parents just need to understand that a child is innocent, and you need to give them every chance of survival. Life is hard, and the only way to raise a child is to raise them with love and connection and trust and safety, and yeah, make them resilient.
I think it's the resiliency, and also providing them maybe I some things that I wish I was able to recognize in my youth was uh, have some tools to help me recognize when bad acting is about to happen. There's the old tricks that it's irrespective of the person doing it, their skin color, where they come from, there are certain human uh, bad actions that are going to happen. And when they're recognized, you can say, hey, like, not to be naive, to understand that there's intention and then there's self-interest. And there's people who focus on a self-interest of the individual, and there's maybe certain people who focus on the self-interest of a community. And if you're not aligned with either the person or the community, um, there's a potential for them to do wrong to you. And I wish I learned some of those ways to recognize that earlier, and it would have just saved me a lot of pain. Because once you trust someone sometimes, and that trust is uh, mismanaged, uh, it can feel. I know I felt stupid. I felt it was my fault that I allowed myself to be put in the situation. Inside, that's how I felt, but I used it as I blamed someone else. Like, you did this to me, and I didn't know. But really, inside, I was like, I can't believe that I fell for that, and I felt bad about myself. And I didn't care about myself, and I didn't love myself, and I kind of hated myself. And um, once feel like I was even told in my life that people are going to do wrong to you, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. There's just people who do wrong things to wrong or to people, and hurt people, try to hurt people.
Mm,
So it's not your fault. You're not, and it took a lot of time, and I still, again, it's so deep in my own trauma that I still try to like remember that. Like, if something seemingly negative happens to me by someone, uh I didn't do anything wrong. And it may sound like, yeah, you didn't. So if someone does something wrong to you, but I struggled with that personally. When I got into a fight, or if someone stole something, if anything bad happened to me in a weird way, I would blame myself. Like, and I don't know why I did that, and I still maybe haven't done enough internal work to figure out what that is. But I'll blame myself when bad things happen to me. But even though it was another person who did it for random reasons. And I try to tell myself and remind myself that, like, when bad things happen, it's not because I did something wrong, and that's hard. Still, it's hard for me. But
mm.
yeah.
It's a good lesson, man. And mate, talk to us a bit about your connection to Eddie Aikau, because I understand you've sailed on that same vessel that he passed away on, doing that inter-island crossing. I won't try and pronounce it because I always butcher it. But yeah, talk to us a bit about, I guess, growing up in the shadow of Eddie Aikau, and how that kind of inspired your way of life, and also yeah, talk to us about your experiences on that boat.
Yeah, on the Hokulea is the double hull sailing canoe that Eddie, unfortunately, was last seen on. And yeah, I feel like having Eddie Aikau's presence, it was more like an illuminance. It's like, it always felt like, to me, Eddie was like a sailor, a navigator, before he was a surfer, in my sort of like coming to know him and being introduced to the legend of Eddie Aikau. It was through the canoe. It wasn't necessarily through the surfing aspect. So I just was kind of introduced to Eddie Aikau through that sense. So he became, from it, that he rode those incredible waves and saved people's lives at Waimea. It was like, on top of him already being this like hero, and being privileged enough to sail on that canoe in my youth, it just, yeah, that, like many people, I would say, has given me sort of like a sense of pride to have something like that in our culture, something that is actively challenging uh, narratives that say we as Polynesian people drifted from the American continent, uh, that we didn't have the necessary math and engineering to sail against the winds and the currents. uh, and these, for thousands of miles in a time where a majority of the world couldn't swim, we had something physical that was challenging that, and I was able to uh, be a part of that. It was like a real gift, I think, in an important time in my life. Um, I don't necessarily sail too often now, really ever, but having an opportunity to see it, to be a part of the society, and still, even as like I call myself land crew. I'm more like if there's anything they need, I'm happy to run to the store, cook food, grab lines, whatever. But for me, it inspired me that as the canoe was sailing around the world, celebrating stories about resiliency, environmental stewardship, cultural identity. When I left to California and to North America, I felt like, okay, like I seen something that my ancestors do and go into a foreign place and go across the world and do something like you can only really, or I look at it as like the astronauts of like, the early ADs going out into like just this vast unknown, not knowing if you're going to find anything, not knowing if you're ever going to return, and creating a culture and a way of living there. So like it kind of helped me to feel confident and empowered me to have my own little canoe, even though it's only me on my canoe when I went away. It just really inspired me to understand that there's going to be challenges and storms and tough currents and big waves metaphorically in this new space, in these new oceans. But if I just tap into who I am and where I came from as a Hawaiian person, I think I can find success.
Mm, And talk to us about just the experience of being at sea at night and looking at the stars on a vessel like that. Like people need to understand that what sets this vessel apart is that it has no navigational equipment. So it is basically an attempt to recreate Polynesian journeys between the islands using traditional navigation, which was basically star mapping.
Yeah, the instruments, the navigation instruments are the navigators. So the human uses their mind and different parts of their body and different parts of the canoe in conjunction with the currents and the animals and the stars and the wind and the sun. So it's sort of this high sort of level calculus that is happening uh, all in one's mind and communicated to a crew to get from a certain point to another point. And I never went deep sea. I've only been inter island, so I only went through channels and things like that. So I don't have necessarily the experience to really describe what it's like to be really in the deep sea and only being able to know where you're going by feeling your place on the planet. Uh, but I got glimpses of what it could be like, of uh, in the night sky. You're just sometimes you just see one little dot that you're told is the way to go forward, and you have to do everything within your will and power to make sure that everyone goes to that direction. And it's sometimes overwhelmed, or it was overwhelming, and sometimes scary, but once you find that, island you're going to, or the harbor or the reef, it's really empowering to know that what the human body and mind is capable of. It kind of, for me, it always felt more than just being a Hawaiian, but it was just a Hawaiian way of understanding how incredible we humans are, you know, and
Mm.
it gave a real deep sense of appreciation for our mind and our physicality, uh, and how we can exist really in a harmony with the natural world. It's really deep.
Oh, it's amazing, mate. It's such an amazing experience and an amazing message to come out of that experience, particularly where it concerns the genius of human beings. When harnessed appropriately and when collectivized through unity, what we can do as a species is remarkable. And that is
Mm,
precisely why the hegemony, the kind of colonialist capitalist hegemony, is so intent on dividing us along lines of class and race because it fears the abundance and emancipation that will come out of unity and togetherness. We're just too smart. But unfortunately, all of our intelligence is poured into war and violence and instruments of control and domination. That's been the pattern over the last few hundred years as the Anglosphere has ruled the world, basically. But I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this Chief of War series that's come out on Apple TV, starring Jason Momoa, and it's like it's essentially perpetuating a similar idea amongst Hawaiian culture that Hawaiian chiefdoms were in a constant state of war and division, and basically the show depicts a constant state of war between various Hawaiian tribes. And the show in a lot of ways is amazing. I really loved the language in particular. I thought that just added such an incredible layer to the show, hearing Hawaiian language spoken like that, and then I'm more than happy to read subtitles when you get to hear a language like that spoken. It adds just layers of authenticity to the experience. Um, and the set design, the landscapes, the costumes, the dialogue, the acting, it's all really good. But then it like all of a sudden turns into the Power Rangers, and you've got Jason Momoa just standing on a cliff killing 20 people at once. It's just fucking like completely ridiculous, like the most classic American bullshit you've ever seen. Like, as if like when one guy's like one out and there's he's faced with 20 people, they're just gonna like fight him one on one. Like, if only the Dahui had seen that fucking uh, show when they tried to take on Rabs on the beach. So what's your take on this series and this stereotype that is so often perpetuated about Polynesian people as being this
mm,
war hungry, warrior, fearsome people? It's a stereotype that exists in abundance in Australia, in the Polynesian communities here, many of whom have grown up in Australia and have never been home to Samoa and Tonga, despite, they're only 3 hours away. I've been to Samoa twice, but in our culture here, there is this concept that Polynesians are a warrior, fearsome people, and we engage in combat sports and combat in the streets. And today they even have created these kind of imitation American gangs, and they're drill rappers, and like this kind of bastardization of warrior culture, gang culture, and violence, petty thuggery is very common in Australia, and it feels to me like this stereotype of Polynesians as being a warrior culture predisposed to violence has been very unproductive. And I wonder if it's also very untrue. Like an Apple
mm,
TV series about Hawaiians navigating by stars and growing
mm,
food and Hawaiian agriculture.
mm,
And like, this is not going to sell, right? It needs violence. It
mm,
needs like this kind of Game of Thrones, like overarching narrative, but like often these narratives end up shaping people's understanding of their own culture because they've never
mm.
been home. In the case of Australia, so yeah, I'd love to get your take on it. These are just ideas. I don't. Yeah, I honestly don't know what the truth of Hawaiian history is.
Yeah, I don't I did watch the series, and I don't know Jason personally. Um, that being said, I do really appreciate what he set out to do. And I think what he was able to achieve has never been done before by in Hollywood by a native Hawaiian. So he has sort of s- put himself and has allowed space for the language, for other actors, for an idea that um, Hawaiian history is mainstream, which I really appreciate. And I think that was really amazing. I again I recognize that Hollywood needs to have certain Hollywood stories and they need to have certain narratives. The Chief of War, um, from what I grew up with, there is a wartime and there's also a peacetime. So it's not always like warfare in the, pre uh it's called the Aikapu. When there was the Aikapu times, there was war and peacetime. And then the Ainoa was after the old ways were abolished, which there's no longer really warring between chiefdoms and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's always things that I could pick at from what I was told. That's not what I heard. That's not what I seen. I don't agree with this or that. But I mean, I'm just a community member. Like I've always been like, if we can find unity in my community and everyone's like, that was the best shit ever, I'm gonna say that's the best shit ever just because I wanna like have something that we can say we all like rally around. If we're like that thing was lame, whatever, I'll say it's lame too. Like I'm in a weird way, I'm not really someone that wants to be this individual. I'm like, I know that's like doesn't make too much sense. People are supposed to be said as like be an individual and like be unique and like I don't know. I want a Hawaiian community. I want to just be one of the thousands that I can say I love my leader and I love my people and I love my home and I'm just one bee in the hive that is just making honey. Like I that's kind of what I fantasize about really in my mind. So when I see someone like Jason going out there and being the figurehead, like I kind of like secretly I like that. I'm like, yeah, like be that for us, even if there's faults, like, I would love personally, and I know maybe it's not a reality at this point. I would love if we had a leader, like a spokesperson on our behalf for the Hawaiian community to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and I don't have to think about all of that, like I know that may sound silly, like, oh, you just want to be a sheep, and I mean, I don't know, it just it I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up with Hawaiian being spoken on TV. Like I didn't grow up with being able to say that was lame or that was cool. Like it just didn't exist. So now that it's out there, it's cool, and I hope there's other better shows out there that are gonna elevate the level of storytelling. Because like you said, there's war is gonna sell. Game of Thrones, he's big and hunky, get him in a malo, that's gonna sell for people who maybe aren't concerned with the history too much. They just want to see big hunky dude beat people up. And I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that's what I think is the best story, but that has to be done to open up space for, there's a really amazing story about this goddess who travels across the islands to find a lover for her sister. And throughout it, she surfs incredible waves and she like challenges crazy chiefs to the death for surfing. And it all comes to this sort of end of a saga where they both fall in love with this guy and the two sisters battle each other on my island. And it's lava versus ocean. And it's this crazy fire and water psycho battle. And the dudes are like, whoa, these chicks are like No, really. And it's just throughout the whole way, it's just it's so much cool nuance within the maternal sort of matriarchal society, which the chant moves around. And it has all these nuances and crazy imagery where there's gods and goddesses and surfing and sailing, and it would be such a crazy Dragon Ball Z meets like Avatar sort of what is that Mel Gibson movie, Braveheart. It'd be
Mm.
like this crazy thing that if Jason needed to do his film or his show in order to make space for someone who's going to come along and tell the story of Iyaka, that's kind of the hope, I guess.
Mm, mm. Yeah, like a couple things came to mind. So in Australia, we have NITV, which is the I think the National Indigenous Television Channel, and they have all kinds of trippy cartoons and animations and shows on there that are about traditional Indigenous culture that are made by Indigenous people, and so it's not this Americanized version of Indigenous culture, because like it's it just really concerns me this glorification of war and violence that is so much a part of every American production ever. Nothing gets made in Hollywood unless it's got that narrative of war and violence in it. And so, like that is an American paradigm of making a project market savvy that just reigns over all content that comes out of America. And you do really like my where I'm at in life. Like I'm sick of that shit, man. I'm sick of just seeing war and violence on the TV all the time. I'm fucking over it. Like, why can't we just have the peacetime in Hawaii represented to us and see what traditional Hawaiian culture looks like prior to colonization and just bask in the mastery of the landscape and the ocean and the spirit world without having to have constant war and Power Ranger fucking fighting like rammed down our throats. Like I feel
Yeah.
like
Or
that.
how it's happening now too. Like that's what I would love to see is the contemporary version of that, where we still are in touch with the spiritual side. We still are. There's a lot of time in peacetime, and there's wartime too, but the wars are different now. The wars are very mental. The wars are very emotional, and spiritual, and that exists for us today. But we're still rocking, in our way, and it isn't very, like you said, Power Ranger. It's more, there are people out there who are, dude, they're out on the ocean and they're talking to the animals. There's still people out there today that like there's this uncle on the other side of the island. They come from the shark line and they like talk to, like, they're crazy. Like you wouldn't believe it unless you've seen it. The relationship that this family has with the sharks. It's like spooky. And yeah, they don't like to share that. They're like, we don't want, and people there's so many people from BBC, National Geographic, Fox, like NBC, like people find out about them and they want to like, how can we tell this story? And they're like, no, that's our families. We don't want to be a part of any of that. But you see it, and like the one uncle goes down and he has shrimp go into his mouth and clean his teeth for him in front of you. Like it's this, and I'm sure you see those people in like Tahiti who swim with the eels, and that's like their friends and things like that. It's like it's so next level, and this isn't like throw the meat out in the ocean and the sharks come and then they like get away. This is how it's like literally like, no, no, they're sleeping. We'll let them. And then, oh, it's time for them to wake up. And they just, no chum, no, like nothing. They're just like, oh, yeah, that's so and so. They have names, like family names for them. It's like, those are like, if there was space, like I said, if hopefully Jason has created space and someone from their family who wants to tell the story, who wants to keep making modern day chants uh, through television, if they want to show that, and if there's now a platform, yeah, that's what I find that more interesting as well. But I'm kind of like a nerd, so I'm like I can't expect that my interests are gonna sell a lot of tickets. You know, like I think and if it's all about the end market of capital to get the views, to get the network, to say it made so much money, these are all businesses a lot of the time. Uh, maybe there needs to be communication around this not saying that's what chief of war is, but in another aspect, if there's something that is being a bit, it's going to sound, I don't want to, the word I want to say is not what I think I should say. If it's going to be leveraged
Mm.
to create resources to empower another opportunity that maybe only will service our community, maybe that can be uh, communicated so people understand what it is. You're looking at the you're looking at a certain thing because a majority of people who don't have time to care are going to subscribe and invest time and money into it. But with those resources, there's going to be something that is going to mean more to fewer people. And if there's some sort of opportunity in that sense, I'll always say that I want to back the Power Ranger Hawaiian,
Yeah, the ends justifies the means. It's a Machiavellian strategy, but I totally get what you're saying. And this is also the danger of a series like this, where it's so authentic and so beautifully shot and beautifully crafted that that storyline takes on
People think it's real.
exactly. And man, I gotta
Yeah.
say, like the situation in Australia at the moment with our Polynesian communities is not good. It's becoming a disaster zone where, in my generation when I was a kid playing football, I grew up with a lot of Polynesian friends through football, and like I was able to see. That was when the culture was still like these were first generation, like their parents grew up in Samoa and Tonga, came via New Zealand to Australia, or direct. And they lived in big family homes, very Christian, very wholesome. We would go to 3 hour uniting church sessions in Maruba or whatever. And then somewhere along the way, uh, that connection was severed. And we are now in a situation where many Polynesians, and this is a big part of this is also just gentrification of the city, where all these original first generation Polynesian people who arrived here were absorbed into the bottom rung of the working class. They play rugby league, they play rugby union, they play working class sports, they work in scaffolding, they work in construction. And now the city has gentrified, and working class people now live further away from the coast and in
Mm.
these kind of deprived areas that are often like public housing ghettos. And Sydney, where I'm from, is now beginning to represent like Compton or Los Angeles. You have like marauding gangs of Middle Eastern migrants who have come from war-torn Beirut and Lebanon, going to war with Polynesian
Mm.
gangs going to war with each other, Polynesians being drill rappers and gangster rappers who are associating themselves with the Bloods and the Crips, like this kind
Yeah.
of bizarre imitation of American gangster rap, and this total
Yeah.
severing of connection with what their culture actually is. They don't know because there's no, like you said, like authentic portrayal of it in the media. They don't go
Yeah.
home to the.
Sensationalized.
It's sensationalized. The warrior violence components are embellished a lot of the time. Their only heroes in these deprived areas are people who become professional rugby league or rugby union players. In which
Yeah.
case the aesthetic is neck tattoo, rat's tail, traditional tattoos. But when you go to Samoa, you don't see neck tattoos. You don't see rat's tails. You don't even see traditional Polynesian tattoos because there's no real reason to identify yourself as Samoan in a country that or everyone is
Everyone is
Samoan.
Samoa.
Like, why would I like so?
Yeah,
There's become this
yeah,
kind of bastardization of Polynesian culture in Australia that is having really negative effects. And a lot of there's certain people breaking ranks as well. There's like really positive stories in those communities where people have realized they're like, what am I doing? I come from a Christian working class family. I had a good upbringing. Why did I want to become a gangster? Why did I become a gangster? Why did I go to jail? And they snap out of it and they realize it was the shitty rap music they were consuming and making and this kind of Americanization of Polynesian culture that they thought was them, and they realize once they're in jail or they come close to it that like this isn't us. Like who are we actually? And a lot of them go back to
yeah,
the church, and it becomes like a very once again it returns to Christianity and God, which are pervasive influences in Tonga and Samoa. Very Christian, often Mormon, which is again like it's a whole like I don't know. It's not exactly colonization, but it is. It's like it's like a colonization of a sort. Like Western Samoa and Tonga, they still have royal families, or Tonga does. Samoa has it's it's a very different situation to Hawaii. Like there's American Samoa, which I imagine is a lot more like Hawaii. I haven't been there, but Western Samoa is a pretty well intact indigenous culture, very peaceful, what I would like abundant, like second world, but very Christian as well. And the Samoans that live in Australia are not like that. They're like the Samoans are one of the most incarcerated. I think they were for a period the most incarcerated minority. That's been since overtaken by the Sudanese, who are coming from again a war-torn region. But yeah, there is a
mm,
lot of panic at the moment in Australia about the effect that refugees and migrants are having on the fabric of Australian culture, whatever that is. I'm not really one of those people who
mm,
shares that. Like I don't have any great panic over it, but I also do concern myself with the depiction of Polynesian
yeah.
culture in popular culture and whether that's accurate.
Well, I think like one of the biggest frustrations could be is like feeling like you're a warrior without a war.
Yeah.
And I, for me, my family has lineage to warrior class. And what like it may sound weird, but I do value, um, I value someone who is willing to go to war. Like I think it's, uh, in my lineage, an important value to understand that there is a time for peace and there's also a time for war. Uh, what I try to recognize is to be a good warrior is to find the war that's worth fighting for. And a lot of time that war isn't between other people, especially other people in Polynesia, especially other people across ocean communities. Like that's not where my war is worth fighting, but to protect the land and protect communities from, like you said, um, overseas threats that don't have a community interest in mind, that's worth it. And a lot of time these wars are fought in a different way than the ways of the old. They're not fought with spears or with cannons or even with fists. Now there's a new spear, and it's, it used to be the pen, and I would say now, the new spear um is really inside of the mind, having a sharp mind, and recognizing again that there's going to be bad actors and people who don't care about the people you love and the resources you value. They're going to come in and they're going to tell you that you need to fight your brother, over there. And recognizing that now, saying, no, that's not the war I'm fighting. The war is actually against that sort of ideology that we need to fight each other instead of fighting the foreign interests that are trying to exploit not just the resources but also the communities who exist on that land. So yeah, it's again, it's like I'm still trying to figure it out, but I do believe in there's a time to fight, but finding your fight is sort of the real work, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and I think a lot of these issues that are happening, it's it's fully due to a disconnection from any kind of meaningful culture. Like if you grow up in the suburbs of Australia, like the sense of belonging, sense of healthy
Mm.
community, it's hard to come by. Like, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you develop social cachet and credibility and love from your community? Well, in these settings, and I've experienced this firsthand, like one of the ways to demarcate yourself as a man, one of the only ways is through violence and intimidation and fear and notoriety. For some reason, that has become like fetishized, is to be a hard cunt,
Mm.
is to be a fucking gangster, is to, because like some of these guys who are getting involved in this gang life, like there's a high profile case at the moment with Izzy Utai, who's the son of Matt Utai, a premiership winning rugby league player. So Izzy is not poor. He grew up with privilege. His dad would be a millionaire, and his dad's Matt Utai, who's very famous, is in a serious condition in hospital after being shot twice by a Middle Eastern crime family. Uh, they were trying to get his son. They got the fucking football legend. It's crazy. And so like this, like it's about finding a sense of belonging and a connection to culture that's actually healthy. Ironically, I think Polynesian communities have the answer. It's more to be found in Polynesian culture than it is in Western culture. How to connect to healthy values, and ironically, the church held the key for a lot of Polynesian families. Um, but yeah, it's a troubling situation. There's something else that I wanted to say that's gone in the middle of my rant, but yeah, don't know what you got.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree. It's like I grew up that way too. You know, it's like big fish, big waves, big truck, gold chains, tattoos, like that. That's how you drink a lot, fight a lot. That's what's gonna get you seen. But once I got exposed and being given access to communities where that wasn't what it means to be the big man, like big man is like taking care of people. Big man is like catching a big fish to give to a lot of people. Like it just I just got real lucky. And again, I think because where I'm from, it's more working class. You remember, you know, you came here, you've seen it's a different side of Hawaii that hasn't been fully developed, you know.
Mm, mm.
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
it glitched out for a second there. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
It's a more traditional form of Polynesia. It's a long way from the North Shore of Oahu or Waikiki or Honolulu for that matter. And the point I was going to make, yeah, was that there does seem to be a connection between those at the bottom end of the working class and the kind of romanticization of gang life and criminal life. Like I've got many white friends who've fallen into this trap. When you grow up at the bottom end of the working class in public housing or in a single parent household, like it's a big mountain to climb to get your own house. Like, like
Totally.
to make money and set yourself up in the capitalist pyramid scheme is almost impossible. It feels like, and so
Totally.
naturally, you look at get rich quick schemes, and selling drugs is the most
Yeah.
obvious and accessible. It was accessible to all of us growing up, and I had friends that went down that path. And so it's not just a Polynesian thing, it's definitely a white thing as well. And I think what, again, we both have in common is being at the wrong end of the class spectrum. And ironically, the gig you get into generally is like selling cocaine and ecstasy to rich people, judges, barristers, politicians, fucking doctors, lawyers. Like, these are the people who both consume the drugs that we traffic and mule, and then lock us up for trafficking and muling them to them. The classical fucking pyramid scheme. The aristocrats, how much money they make off the enforcement of law, which is usually like often targeted at low class drug traffickers and dealers. It's crazy. It's the perfect scam.
Yeah, no, that is yeah, that's a difficult, yeah, that's common here too. And I can think of many examples of yeah, I don't know the answer, but it would, man, it would save so much of our community members so much pain, and their children and their family members, the suffering of not having them because of incarceration or because of it seems very justifiable, coming from sometimes these communities. You're like, there, you question if you're even able to get employment to make money, and you get some employment and you work for so long, so hard, and you're treated so terribly that you don't see it as effective. Whereas you just see, I can do this. It's a high risk, but I can do this, and that's 10 years of my life working. Do that in a night. I'm just going to do it. And just whatever happens, because the risk is worth the reward. 5 years of slaving and not seeing my family anyway. Uh, 10 years, if I get busted, it's really just 5 years of I'm putting on the table, when you think about it. So, like, people think through this. It's not just like, I want to be a thug, I want to sell drugs, I want to be a baller. Like, some of, these individuals, unfortunately, didn't want to do it. They just are like, this is the only means to provide. I'm going to do it. And I know that may seem stupid, and like it is. It's stupid that some of these community members are put in a situation where they think uh, pursuing illegal activity is the best case scenario for them. That sucks. That it's that way. That some of these things are illegal, some other things, like, that's a whole nother discussion. But I feel like, yeah, certain people are rewarded by giving prescriptions, and some people are locked up for giving them at a cheaper rate. I don't know. That's a whole nother, I think, conversation. But yeah.
Yeah, well said, man. And finally, like as I mentioned at the top of the program, there's a Hawaiian in the White House, and she's the director of the Department of Justice, and she's one step away from being the president of the United States. And she listens to this program occasionally, has been on this program. Yeah, maybe she'll listen to this. Who knows? But if you could, send a message to her, or send some kind of instruction in how you would like to see Hawaiian and Asia Pacific culture represented at that level, what would it be?
I mean, dude, that's like way above my pay grade. I don't feel like I have any advice, in that sense, on that high level. I can't imagine how complicated it becomes on that level when you're in charge of not just Hawaiian people, but every other person, citizen and not, that enters into a region that has been created by humans. Like, borders and all that. Like, that's just, like, such like a trippy, like, borders where there's just like right across the fence, it's the same land, same animals, same wind, same water, but right across that fence is not you, but right here is you. Like, that to me is a mind fuck in itself. So I'm not gonna say like what needs to happen, because I'm sure it's so much deeper, and I'm sure the truths that are realized in high government can break people. And I think my mental would for sure snap if I realized all these islands and lists and who was on what, and people were doing, all kind of crazy activities. So I mean, definitely more power to those who feel that governance and leadership in government is their calling. Personally, for me, the only thing I would, in my lifetime, I just would hope that I can call myself a Hawaiian. Like, if there's something on paper that when I'm asked what is my identity, I would just love a little box that says I'm Hawaiian. Like that, that doesn't exist right now. It's
Mm.
Asian Pacific Islander. It's what's your ethnicity? You have Pacific Islander. Native Hawaiian is sort of like like what you identify as. But when I have a passport, I'm an American. That's what people tell me. And it's something that I faced a lot growing up, like the confusion, and that's probably one of my biggest uh holes in my life, uh, is to just when people ask me, "What are you?" When I say Hawaiian, it's not questioned. No one's trying to correct me to say you're an American. Like if there is ever in my lifetime an opportunity to say you can just be a Hawaiian, that's it. And if I got U.S. citizenship, I'd be stoked too, because the U.S. is it empowers a lot of their citizens to do a lot of everyday activities with minimal stress in comparison to other people, like my friends in Morocco or my friends in certain parts of Indonesia, South Africa, even. There's difficulties for them to see me. It's even in Hawaii, they can't even travel or they automatically get put into secondary. And having a U.S. citizenship, when I bust out that blue book, no worries. I could look like I am from Morocco or wherever, and it's like, oh, you got the pass. So I'm not saying I would not want to have it. Um, but yeah, even if it came down to that, like I think at this point in my life, I would choose to be a Hawaiian. Like I
Mm.
just would like to be able to be that without being told I am a nationality that is 2,500 miles away from me, run by people who have never seen or maybe care to drink the water I grew up drinking and surfing and farming and like that. You know, if there's opportunity to allow me to identify as a native Hawaiian man, and that's all I got to do for the concerns of the government, that'd be rad.
Mm, mm. Oh, well, let me rephrase that slightly. What what values from Polynesian, Hawaiian, or even more broadly, this kind of composite of like Asia Pacific culture, do you think could be exported around the world, could be exported out of the American presidency and have a positive impact on, how we understand how to live a good life?
I mean, I think it just, I don't know what the things would be, but if there could be some extended time here in Hawaii to maybe get the answers from people who are way smarter than me, uh, I think that would probably be the best thing, just spending more time in Hawaii. And again, it's just so hard to think about, like, if I was to say, like, what would I tell the president to do to save the world? Like, man, like that my world exists in a small place for a majority of my thought. It's just my community.
Mm,
And then what's actually it's my home, and then it goes into like my neighborhood, and then it goes into my town. And then for the, even thinking about what's best for Kauai, or Molokai or Oahu sometimes is like, I don't know what's best because I'm not spending a lot of time there. But yeah, it's a hard one. I wish I had an answer for it. I just don't know.
I
All,
think
you know,
I
it's
think
the
that is the answer. Like, is decentralizing power and giving it back to communities, empowering communities to make decisions for themselves as opposed to being ruled by some centralized government that, like you said, hasn't drunk the water in your neighborhood. So why are they making rules or laws for you? And I think, this was Gandhi's vision when he got rid of the British from India was to, rather than have centralized government, have all the communities of India with their own little councils of elders, and they communicate with each other, fiefdoms, chiefdoms, or just banjars, you might want to call them, as they're known in Bali. Like, they actually do operate largely on that system, where the banjars are these, councils of spiritual elders, and each little regency has one. And when there's issues, they talk to each other. And the beauty of this kind of system, this decentralized power system, which I think totally is the future, is that it brings in all this accountability. If you have an issue in your family or your community, you can go straight to one of these people. They're everywhere. There's like in the Balinese
mm,
system, there's like many of these Banjar representatives. They're very easy to see and talk to and get a meeting with,
mm,
as opposed to this kind of bureaucratic system that we all suffer under, where there's zero accountability. You don't know who's
yeah,
making your rules. They don't know you.
yeah,
And that's why they misfire all the time, and people are relentlessly slipping through the cracks.
mm, yeah. That would be actually really amazing to see, you know, the person at your local surf break or shop. Like it, I mean, how amazing would it be if the person ringing up the groceries is actually a representative, or you see them like every week, you know, and you go, how's everything? Like, I don't know. And it's like, yeah, more access to those in charge of making the rules would be amazing. And that is, I believe, yeah, it would be great to see a Polynesian uh tradition, you know, or a community minded, yeah, coastal community minded vision would be cool.
Sick, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, Cliff. Far out. It's always a
Yeah,
good
brother.
time chatting with you, man. It's born in the same year, me and you, and yeah, there's been a lot of crossover in our lives, so it's a pleasure discussing ideas with you, man. And you coming down here pretty
Yeah,
soon?
I would love to. Yeah, it looks like there might be a window for me to get down south side next month, so I'm just keeping an eye on the storms and maybe find some cylinders.
Oh man, we're a little bit early in the season, but yeah, like frick. I mean, May's the month, Magic May, but either side of that is like prime time. So yeah, hope you get a couple. I hope to see you.
Yeah, same.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Yeah, thank you so much, bro. We'll talk soon.
All right, see you, bro.